I was standing on a wooden stool, reaching up to set the old ceramic angel on the top shelf, when my phone buzzed against the counter. I didn't think much of it. Probably another promotional text, or the feed store reminding me my order was ready. I wiped my hands on my apron and tapped the screen. It was a message from my daughter, Chloe. 4 sentences, short, sharp, surgical. Mom, we need to talk. After thinking it over, we've decided Christmas is going to be different this year. We're upgrading our holiday traditions. We won't be doing our usual thing at your house. Please don't be upset. No, love you. No explanation, just upgrading. I read it twice, then a third time, as if the meaning would rearrange itself into something less cruel. My hands felt numb, but my chest was hot, like someone had taken a match to dry leaves and let the flame crawl up my ribs. I scrolled up and reread all our old Christmas messages, years of them. Photos of my kids in matching pajamas on the couch I bought with coupons. Them unwrapping gifts I stayed up late to wrap. The fireplace I built with my own hands warming their faces while they laughed so hard I could swear the house breathed with them. Now, apparently, all of that was too outdated for their new traditions. The phone buzzed again, this time from my son, Caleb. Mom, I didn't want to pile on, but yeah, same thing. Tessa's family is hosting a big Christmas Eve this year, wine pairings, private chef, all that. It'll be more elevated. We'll drop by to see you after the holidays. Maybe January. Elevated. They said it so casually, like they were talking about raising a curtain instead of slicing through the heart of the woman who raised them. I sat down on the nearest chair, the old oak one their father carved before he died, and tried to breathe through the sting. The room around me felt suddenly foreign, as if the walls were surprised too. There were garlands on the window, the soft glow of warm light strung along the mantel, the smell of pine and cinnamon still hanging in the air. Christmas had always been ours, our glue, our refuge, and now I wasn't part of it. I typed back slowly. I see. Do either of you want to come over before the holiday? Chloe responded in seconds, like she'd been waiting behind the door to fire the final shot. Probably not, Mom. We're doing a designer tree this year and have planning to do. And please don't take this personally. You know your house is small and cluttered. It stresses us out. Small and cluttered. I looked around at my home, at the quilts I stitched by hand, the ornaments my kids made in school, the mantel lined with photos of them missing teeth or covered in cake frosting, their joy messy and pure. Cluttered, apparently. Caleb chimed in too, like they'd coordinated. Yeah, Mom, Tessa wants an aesthetic holiday. Minimalist, modern, curated. We can't really do that at your place. Curated, aesthetic, upgraded, elevated. They weren't talking to their mother anymore. They were talking to an inconvenience. And the worst part wasn't that they uninvited me. It was that they truly believed I would just sigh, nod, and step out of the frame so their new Instagram ready Christmas could shine without my clutter. So I wrote back, understood, have a lovely Christmas. But that was a lie. Because I understood far more than they thought. I understood that Chloe had been living rent-free in the condo I owned under an LLC, a detail she never bothered to ask about. She thought it belonged to her boyfriend's real estate friend, never noticing the mortgage payments came from me. I understood that Caleb's fiance's beloved designer tree came from a credit card I paid off every month. I understood that their minimalist apartment was furnished by my quiet contributions, disguised as discount hookups. I understood that the elevated lifestyle they were so eager to brag about was built entirely on the quiet money I funneled to them for years, without taking credit, without flaunting, without asking for a thank you, because that's what mothers do. And I understood something else, something colder. They didn't value me because I never made them feel what it cost me to give them everything. But this Christmas, they would learn, not through yelling, not through guilt, not through tears, but through consequences, the purest form of honesty. I deleted their messages, wiped my hands again, and leaned the ceramic angel back where she belonged. Christmas was coming, and I had a gift to prepare, one they'd never, ever forget. I didn't reply again that night, not to Chloe's chirpy messages about color palettes for the designer tree, not to Caleb's half-hearted thumbs-up emoji in the family group chat, not to the photo they sent of themselves smiling in front of some expensive store display. The caption reading, "Upgrading Tradition Sparkles." I simply put my phone face down on the counter and let the silence settle over the house, heavy as winter snow. Because I had a decision to make. For most of my life, when something hurt, I'd swallow it like a stone and keep going. That's what my mother taught me. That's what ranch life teaches you. There's no room to fall apart when there are animals to feed, fences to mend, bills to pay. But this was different. This was my children telling me, with curated filters and polished words, that the life I built for them was now too embarrassing to be part of their calendar. And I realized something sharp. People only stop respecting what they think is free. I was the one who made everything free. The rent-free condo, the down payment disguised as a wedding gift, the emergency fund they thought came from an old friend of dad's, the credit card they believed was preloaded from a rewards program. All me. Quiet, invisible, constant. And because I never put my name on any of it, because I didn't want to burden them with guilt or obligation, they'd convinced themselves they built an upgraded life on their own. They hadn't. They were living in a house of cards made from my sacrifice. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the small office I rarely opened. Inside was an old walnut desk and a cabinet filled with binders, contracts, and financial documents nobody else knew existed. I turned on the lamp. The light buzzed, flickered, then steadied. The room smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner, a scent that brought me back to nights balancing the books while the kids slept in bunk beds down the hall. I pulled the first drawer open. Inside were folders labeled C. Carter, Education Fund C. Carter, Housing Support Caleb, Emergency Reserve Chloe, Business Grants Support I gave. Support they forgot. Support they now wanted to replace with something elevated. I took out the folder marked Property 12B Northridge lease agreement that was Chloe's condo, the one she thought belonged to her boyfriend's friend, Sam the investor. Sam didn't exist, the LLC did, and I owned it. The lease was written in a way only one person would ever think to question it me, because I knew one day they'd need to see the truth, and I refused to let it blindside them in a way they could deny. I traced the signature line with my finger. Landlord, Northridge Holdings LLC under that tiny initials, MC, my initials. I had given her space to grow, but she'd used that space to forget me. Next, I opened the binder labeled CALEB and Tessa credit account. Every charge, every purchase, every designer thing she bragged about to her coworkers, all neatly paid each month from my checking account. They didn't know. They didn't care to know. And then, the biggest file of them all. WNTR Sirius D cabin ownership/deed. The house they all loved posting photos in. The one with the snowy porch, the red wreath, the roaring fireplace. The aesthetic cabin Caleb and Tessa used for every holiday photo shoot. They always captioned their posts with, "A little getaway in the woods, evergreen sparkles, blessed Kaza vibes." Not once did they mention whose getaway it actually was. I'd bought that cabin after my husband died, a place to breathe, to remember him. But my kids took it over the moment they discovered I owned something picturesque. And I let them, because it made them happy. But now I saw clearly, they loved what I provided, not me. And if I took away the things, would there be anything left? I closed the folders and stacked them neatly. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't acting out of emotion. This wasn't anger, this was clarity. The same clarity I had the day I walked into the ER after my husband's accident, when I realized that grief could either kill me or sharpen me. I chose sharp. Tonight, I chose sharp again. I poured myself a cup of black tea, the kind my husband used to drink after long days, and sat back down at the desk. Then, slowly, deliberately, I drafted 4 emails. Not nasty, not emotional, not dramatic, just professional. Cold, final. Email 1 to the property management company subject. Immediate lease adjustment. Unit 12B requesting full market rent applied starting January 1st. No more family discount. No more hidden subsidies. Email 2 to the credit card company subject. Account closure 9982 closing the line entirely. Balance due immediately. Email 3 to the cabin's maintenance service subject. Hold scheduling plus access restrictions access codes reset. Only one authorized code remains, mine. Email 4 to my attorney subject. Revise beneficiary conditions updating my estate. Inheritance now conditional on 1 year of self-sufficiency. When my finger hovered over send, I hesitated only once. A small voice whispered, "You're their mother. Isn't your job to save them?" But another voice, stronger, truer, answered, "A mother's job isn't to save her children from consequences. It's to raise children who don't fear them." I clicked send. The emails whooshed into the world, clean and efficient as a winter wind. Tomorrow, the first domino would fall. Tonight, I cleaned the teacup, turned off the light, and went to bed with a quiet heart. because for the first time in years, I knew they were finally going to see me. Not the comfort, not the money, not the safety net. Me. And Christmas was only 3 days away. The next morning, the ranch was still dark when I stepped outside, winter air sharp enough to slice lung tissue. Frost clinging to the fence rails like silver moss. The kind of cold that forces you to be honest about what hurts. I stood there for a long moment, gloved hands shoved into my pockets, watching my breath drift upward like a slow burning confession. Today was the day the first consequences would land. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, but the quiet, precise kind that rearrange a person's understanding of how the world actually works. I fed the horses, broke ice in the troughs, and checked the generator. Work steadies the mind. Work makes emotions manageable. Work keeps hands from shaking. But even as I shoveled grain and tightened latches, my thoughts wandered back to my kids. To Chloe, who once slept curled on my chest as a baby because she hated the dark. To Caleb, who used to run barefoot through the hayfield calling me Mama like it was the whole language he needed. To Christmas mornings when they would race down the stairs, faces glowing, believing the world was magical because I never let them see how hard I fought to make it feel that way. Now those same children were upgrading their holiday traditions without me. By 8 a.m. My phone buzzed, Calibrate Arrow missed call one then a text. Mom, why did my card decline at the grocery store? The bank says the primary payer closed the account. Did you do something? I didn't answer. I finished mucking the stalls. Brushed my mare, Ruby, until her coat gleamed. Let the silence between us stretch like an unbroken wire. 5 minutes later, another text from him. Mom, this isn't funny. That was our grocery money for the week. Tessa is freaking out. They were used to convenience disguised as luck. Used to money that magically fixed everything. Used to comfort with no source. And now they were learning that magic has a magician. I set my phone on the fence post and continued working. At 9:12, Chloe finally noticed. Her name flashed on my screen with a notification so bright it seemed to cut through the winter fog. Chloe, Mom, why is the property manager saying our rent is now $2,750? They said the discount is gone. This must be a clerical error, right? Right. 3 messages, then 4, then 7. She was spiraling. Good, she needed to spiral. People hold on tighter when they're falling. But I didn't open the thread, not yet. Instead, I walked back inside, hung my coat, and made myself breakfast, eggs, toast, nothing fancy. The same breakfast I'd made for the kids their whole childhood. Funny how simple food can fill a house more than any gourmet menu. At 10:03 a.m., the cabin door's access system logged its first attempt. Attempted entry, WNTRCRST cabin, code invalid. Then, invalid access code. Try again, invalid access code. Try again, invalid attempt lockout, 30 seconds. I smiled into my coffee cup. They'd driven up to the cabin, the one they'd plastered across social media like it was theirs, probably planning to take holiday photos in their matching outfits. Probably rehearsing a caption about cozy Christmas escapes. They hadn't realized I'd changed the access code overnight. Then my phone rang, Caleb calling, I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then Chloe called, then again, then FaceTime. I ignored that too. Finally, a text from Caleb came through that made me pause mid-sip. Mom, we're standing outside the cabin. It's 27 degrees. Our food is in the trunk. We planned Christmas Eve here. Please just tell us the new code. There it was, the crack. The first break in their upgraded facade. They weren't asking with superiority anymore. They were asking with need. But need and entitlement can sound similar. I waited to hear which one it truly was. A minute later, Chloe texted. If this is some passive-aggressive punishment for us not coming to your house, it's not cool. We have plans, just give us the new code so we can decorate. Punishment, decorate, plans, still entitlement, not yet ready. I set the phone down and walked to the laundry room. Started folding the flannel sheets I'd washed the night before. Work steadies the mind. At noon, everything changed. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't the impatient ring of someone annoyed. It was the trembling, high-pitched panic ring, the one people make when the world tips beneath them. I answered, Mom. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper, thin, frayed, not the voice of the woman who called my house cluttered, not the woman who uninvited me. Mom, she said again, are you there? I'm here. She exhaled, shaky, relieved, scared. Mom, the cabinet's locked. We can see the lights are off inside. There's no heat. We thought maybe the generator failed, but the maintenance company said the owner restricted access. Mom, that's you, isn't it? Yes, I said simply, her breath hitched. Why would you do that? It's Christmas, this is our tradition now. Our tradition? I repeated. We used to have a different one, if I remember. Silence, then very quietly, Mom, please, Tessa's family is coming for photos. We're supposed to host dinner. We planned everything. We already posted the teaser story. Ah, there it was, not family, not meaning, not wanting to spend time with me. They needed the cabin for the aesthetic, for the content, for the illusion. I leaned against the counter, the phone warm against my ear. Chloe, I said calmly, I'm giving you the Christmas you asked for. What does that mean? You wanted upgraded traditions, I said. You wanted aesthetic holidays. You wanted curated, minimalist, modern. You said my home stresses you out, so I simplified your life. What, Mom, we're freezing out here? That wasn't part of my plan, I answered softly. But consequences don't ask permission. Her voice cracked then, a sound I hadn't heard since she was little and scraped her knee on the gravel driveway. Mom, please, can we just come in? Just for now, we need heat. We need. You uninvited me, remember? I kept my voice even, controlled, not cruel, just honest. You made it clear there was no room for me in your upgraded life, but we didn't mean. Intentions don't change outcomes, I said. Silence spread between us, cold and honest. Then Chloe whispered the sentence that tightened something inside my chest. Mom, are we homeless right now? No, I said gently. But you are on your own, just like you requested. I could hear Caleb in the background, his voice shaking with anger and fear. Ask her who owns the cabin, Chloe. She's being dramatic. She's punishing us. Tell her we'll call the police. I spoke before Chloe could respond. You can call the police if you want, but when they look up the deed, they'll see the owner is standing in her kitchen making tea. Chloe sobbed, the sound sharp and high, the sound of reality hitting bone. Mom, we don't have anywhere else to go tonight. Please, just for Christmas, please don't do this. I took a long breath. You'll have a place to go, I said, but not the one you're expecting. What does that mean? It means you'll learn who's been paying for your life, I said quietly. And once you know that, then we'll begin the next part. The next part of what? Of Christmas, I said, the real kind. Then I hung up, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity, because a mother doesn't just protect her children. Sometimes she must strip away the illusion so they can finally see the truth. They stayed outside the cabin far longer than I expected. I saw it through the security feed on my laptop, 4 small camera windows, each one glowing faintly in the dim light of my office. Their bodies huddled by the porch, breath fogging in white puffs, their coats nowhere near warm enough for mountain cold. I should have felt guilt. A mother is supposed to feel guilt when her children shiver. But guilt is what made them this soft in the first place. I watched Chloe pace back and forth, rubbing her gloved hands together like she could warm herself by friction alone. Caleb kept trying the door code even though it was already locked out. Tessa was crying in the car, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. It was the first honest moment I'd ever seen from her. Then Caleb stormed up to the camera, his face inches away from the lens, breath fogging the glass. Mom, he yelled into the frosted air. Answer the phone, this is insane. I didn't, I closed the laptop. They needed the silence. Silence forces people to hear themselves. I walked into the living room, built a fire in the stone hearth, and sat on the rug with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I stared into the flames the way I used to when my husband was alive, listening to wood crackling like old memories trying to speak. The clock ticked. The fire burned. The house stayed warm. By 4:30 p.m. The sun was starting to fall behind the ridge, turning the snow outside a bruised shade of lavender. I imagined them watching daylight slip away with no shelter behind them. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, right arrow, incoming call. I knew that number. Mountain County Sheriff's Office. I picked up. This is Marshall, a deep voice said, gruff but polite. Ma'am, I'm calling because your children called us from outside Wintercrest Cabin. They said they're locked out in freezing weather. I'm aware, I said calmly. Are you the owner of the property? Yes. Are you denying them entry intentionally? Yes. There was a long pause, long enough for me to picture the sheriff blinking. Ma'am, are they trespassing? No, I answered, but they are uninvited. Another pause. Are they minors? No, 32 and 29. Well then, Marshall sighed. This is a civil matter. We can't force you to let them in. I know, I said. He cleared his throat. Do you want us to remove them from the property? For a moment, the temptation nearly buckled my knees. To have them escorted off the land Dee once bragged about as though they owned it, to watch them realize the world doesn't bend to their preferences, but no, not yet. Not necessary, I said. I'll speak to them. All right, he exhaled, relieved. But for what it's worth, ma'am, you're not wrong for setting boundaries. A sheriff telling me that. Imagine, I hung up and grabbed my coat. The drive to Wintercrest was 30 minutes of winding mountain road, snow crunching under my tires like breaking bone. As I drove, my thoughts moved in quiet, steady circles. For years I had covered their bills, hidden the truth to protect their pride, defended them, excused their selfish moments, softened every blow life tried to give them. I had been mother, father, shield, safety net, and silent architect of their comfort. And what did that make them? Blind. Comfort without gratitude is blindness. Privilege without awareness is rot. By the time I reached the top of the mountain, darkness had settled fully, and the cabin stood in a pool of moonlight, beautiful, cold, unreachable. I parked and got out. My boots crunched on ice. Wind knifed across my face. The air tasted metallic. Caleb saw my headlights and ran toward me, desperation making his stride crooked. Mom, finally, he shouted. We've been here for hours. What the hell is going on? I shut the truck door without answering. Chloe came next, eyes red, mascara streaked, expensive coat dusted with snow. Mom, please, please don't leave us out here again. We're freezing. I walked past them, up the porch steps, right to the cabin door. I didn't open it. I turned around and faced all three of them. Tessa hovered behind the siblings, cheeks pale, lips trembling. Mrs. Carter, she whispered, voice cracking, we didn't do anything wrong. Please let us in. Please, I can't feel my toes. Her honesty was the only sincere thing I'd heard from them in months, but sincerity wasn't enough, not yet. You said, I began quietly, that my home was too small, too cluttered, too embarrassing. That's not, Chloe started, but I held up a hand. You said you were upgrading your holiday traditions. I looked between them, their breath fogging the air. You said my presence didn't fit your aesthetic. Their faces folded, regret now. Aching, raw regret. Too late, maybe. I stepped closer. The wind whipped my hair into my face. Snowflakes clung to my eyelashes. You wanted a Christmas without me, I said softly, and here you are. A Christmas without me? A long, terrible silence followed. Caleb swallowed hard. Mom, we didn't mean it like that. Intentions, I said, don't fix damage, they only explain it. Tessa sobbed. We're sorry. I nodded once. Good, but apology isn't the lesson. What lesson? Chloe whispered. The truth, I said. The truth about who built your lifestyle, and what your life looks like without it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope, thick, heavy, the kind that smells like ink and consequence. I placed it in Chloe's shaking hands. She hesitated, then ripped it open. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third, her breath hitched as understanding sank in. The condo contract, the credit account, the cabin deed, the estate stipulation, all of it. All the scaffolding of their lives, the parts they never looked at suddenly visible. Caleb snatched a page from her hand, his face drained of color. This, his voice broke. This is everything. Yes, I said, everything I paid for, everything you thought was yours. They stared at the pages like they were looking at the ruins of a city they once lived in. I stepped back. Your Christmas starts now, I said. No curated backdrops, no designer gifts, no aesthetic lies. They stared at me, broken, terrified, silent. You're adults. So you'll learn like adults. I pointed toward the truck. Get in, I said, all of you. They moved slowly, uncertainly, like people stepping onto thin ice. Caleb looked up at me, voice barely audible. Where are we going? I met his eyes with quiet finality. Home, I said, but not the one you expected. The truck ride down the mountain felt like carrying three ghosts in the back seat. No one spoke. No one dared. The headlights sliced through the falling snow, illuminating the narrow road as it curved and dipped. Each turn rattled the silence inside the cab. Even the heater seemed too loud, blowing its tired breath across a tension so thick it could have been cut with a hunting knife. Caleb stared out the window like a child punished for the first time in his life. Chloe sat rigid, hands clenched around the envelope, knuckles white enough to glow. Tessa trembled beside them, whether from cold or fear I couldn't tell. About 10 minutes down the road, Chloe finally cracked. Her voice came out small, strangled. Mom, where are you taking us? Where you should have gone years ago, I answered. She flinched. Even Caleb lifted his head at that. Are you dropping us at your house? He asked, voice rough. We'll stay. We'll do Christmas there. We're sorry, okay? We're really sorry, just don't leave us somewhere else. I didn't answer because sorry wasn't the currency they owed. Sorry couldn't rebuild character. Sorry couldn't purge entitlement. Consequences could. We reached the bottom of the ridge. The The town lights flickered across the valley like dying embers. I made a sharp left at the stop sign instead of heading toward the ranch. Chloe shot upright. Mom, this isn't the way to your place. I know. Caleb leaned forward. His voice was shaking now. Where are we going? To learn, I said. Chloe swallowed hard. Learn what? I gripped the wheel. That life without a safety net is different from the one you've been living. They stared at me, three pairs of desperate eyes reflected in the windshield. After 15 more minutes, street lamps grew dimmer, buildings more worn. Graffiti curled along brick walls. Windows were boarded, plaster cracked. Old neon signs flickered with the last stubborn sparks of a neighborhood forgotten by everyone except those forced to stay. Tessa whispered, where are we? Where I raised you before your father's promotion changed everything, I said. But you were too young to remember, and I let you forget. Chloe blinked, stunned. Caleb stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Finally, I pulled into a small parking lot beside an aging brick apartment building. The sign out front hung crooked, lit by a single buzzing bulb. Maple View Housing, the same place where your original story had a reckoning, but this one was different. This was the mother's version. This was their childhood's buried truth. I parked and cut the engine. Get out, I said. They hesitated like they feared what waited outside more than the cold. So I said it again, softer but sharper, get out. The three of them stepped out into the icy air, breath turning to fog instantly. I led them up the cracked sidewalk, icy patches glittering like shards of glass. The building loomed above us, old, tired, and honest. This, I said quietly, is where your father and I lived when we had nothing. When I worked double shifts at the diner and he patched drywall on weekends. When we couldn't afford Christmas trees, so I taped green construction paper to the wall and drew ornaments with crayons. Their eyes widened. You lived here, Caleb whispered, almost disbelieving. You were babies, I said. You slept in a second-hand playpen beside the heater because the insulation was so thin the walls froze every night. We ate soup for a month because rent went up by $40. Chloe pressed a hand to her mouth. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't want you to grow up afraid, I said. And because later, when your father's business took off and money became easy, I didn't want you to feel guilty. The wind howled through the alley nearby, rattling old dumpsters and shuttering windows. I walked them up the stairs to the third floor, the oak steps groaning under our weight. At apartment 3C, I stopped. The hallway smelled like bleach, old carpet, stale air, just like it had 29 years ago. I turned to them. This, I said, was our home. Tessa looked around as if expecting cameras to come out and declare it a prank. It's tiny, she said softly. It was ours, I corrected, and we were grateful. I pulled out another envelope from my coat pocket and handed it to Caleb. He didn't open it immediately. What is this? He asked. The price, I said. The price you have never had to pay. Finally, he tore the seal. Inside were Cape receipts from the hospital, after he broke his arm invoices for Chloe's dance lessons, the contract for the condo, every transfer I ever made into their accounts, a list of all the debts I paid off in silent statements, showing every time they overdrew, every time they borrowed. Every time I saved them while they were too comfortable to notice Caleb's face drained of blood as he flipped through page after page. Mom, he whispered, this can't be real. It's real, I said. All of it, every number, every gift, every rescue. Chloe stared at me, tears spilling freely. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because I thought if I gave you everything quietly, you would learn humility, I said. I was wrong. The hallway fell silent. Then I spoke the sentence they were not prepared to hear. Tonight you're staying here. Three pairs of eyes snapped up, panic rising hot and fast. What? Caleb stuttered. No, Mom, we can't. You can, I said, and you will. Chloe shook her head violently. Mom, please, we can't sleep here. This place is unupgraded, I asked. Cluttered, unaesthetic. Beneath your standards? She froze. I stepped closer. You told me I didn't fit your upgraded holiday. Tonight you don't fit mine. Caleb swallowed hard. But what about clothes, food, heat? I nodded. There's heat, I said, and blankets and soup, and beds smaller than your egos. Tessa sobbed into her hands. It's Christmas Eve? Yes, I said, and this is how it begins. Chloe's voice cracked. Mom, please don't leave us here. I softened then just a fraction. I'm not abandoning you, I said. I'm bringing you back to where you came from. Back to the truth so you can learn to appreciate what you built your lives on. Then I placed a key in Chloe's shaking hand. 3C is yours for the night, I said. You'll survive. We did. Caleb looked at me, raw and broken. Will you come in with us? No, I said. You asked for a Christmas without me, I'm giving it to you. A sharp wind blew down the hallway, lifting my hair and sending chills through all of us. I stepped back. Learn, I whispered. Feel, understand. Then I turned, walked down the hallway, down the stairs, out the door. They watched me leave from the window, silhouettes framed in yellow light, three grown children suddenly small again. I got into my truck and drove away, heart heavy but clear. Sometimes love means letting them fall. Tonight, I let them hit the ground softly, but far enough that they'd feel the impact. And tomorrow would show whether they were ready to climb back up. Snow chased me down the highway like ghosts trying to cling to the back of my truck, whispering doubts into the metal. Turn around, they're cold, they're scared. They're your babies, but another voice, quiet, steel-edged, long ignored, whispered something truer, they're not babies anymore. They're adults who never learned to stand in the storm without you shielding them. And tonight, the shield was down. Miles passed beneath my tires in a blur, but my mind was still trapped in that hallway, watching my children standing in the apartment where their lives started and where their illusions were now beginning to crumble. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home, not yet. Home felt too warm, too safe, too forgiving. And forgiveness was a checkpoint, not a starting point. Instead, I parked the truck beneath an old street lamp at the edge of town, facing the horizon where the city lights pulsed faintly through the storm. I stayed there, engine off, heat fading. Just me and the cold, letting the weight settle on my shoulders the way the snow settled on the windshield, because I had to sit with what I'd done. A mother's instinct is to rescue, to soften, to comfort. But instincts grow twisted when they're used to protect adults who weaponize softness to stay comfortable. My kids weren't cruel. That was the part that hurt most. They were careless, blind, detached from reality in a way that only comes from never having to crash into it. The truth? I created their world. I built the pillow beneath their fall before they ever tripped. And tonight was the first night they encountered life without padding. A text buzzed on my phone, Chloe's name flashing on the screen. I didn't open it. A voicemail from Caleb followed. I didn't listen. A missed call from Tessa came next. My gut twisted, but I didn't pick up, not because I enjoyed the silence, but because transformation only happens in darkness, not under a parent's flashlight. I let the phone go still in my hand. Minutes became an hour. By the time I started the truck again and headed back toward the apartment district, the snow had stopped. The world glowed under a blanket of white, crisp and unbroken, except for the tracks of a single pair of footprints weaving across the sidewalk near Maple View. My heart lurched. I followed the prints until they stopped near the door of the building. Not three sets of prints, just one. I moved faster, boots striking hard against the frozen ground, breath tearing from my throat as I pushed into the stairwell. Inside, the elevator was still broken. The hallway lights flickered overhead. Somewhere upstairs, someone was yelling. Somewhere closer, someone was crying. When I reached the third floor, I found them. All three, sitting outside 3C. Chloe's arms were wrapped around her knees. Caleb sat slumped beside her, staring at the opposite wall as if waiting for it to collapse inward. Tessa was curled on her side, head in Chloe's lap, asleep or exhausted, maybe both. The door to the apartment was shut. The key lay on the floor beside them. Not inside the lock, not broken, just sitting there, untouched, I exhaled shakily. They hadn't gone in, they hadn't made that first step. As I approached, Chloe looked up, her lips trembling. Mom, we couldn't. Her voice cracked like ice under pressure. It doesn't feel real, she whispered. It feels like a nightmare we're supposed to wake up from. Caleb dragged a hand over his face. It's so small, he murmured. And the walls, Mom, I could hear people fighting. Someone threw something. Chloe panicked. Tess started crying. I didn't know what to do. His voice was a confession carved out of fear. We're not used to this. Used to what? Reality? Hardship? Thin walls and thinner wallets? Uncertainty? I drew a slow breath and crouched down to their level. None of you went inside. They shook their heads in unison. We tried, Chloe said, but the second I turned the knob, I froze. It felt like stepping backward in time, like everything we worked for, everything you gave us vanished. Her throat bobbed. I didn't know how to breathe in there. There it was. The first fracture in the glass tower they'd been living in. I leaned against the opposite wall, looking at their faces. The children I had raised, the adults they had become, and the broken pieces that lay beneath the polished surfaces they displayed to the world. Do you know, I said softly, why I brought you here? Caleb lifted his eyes. To punish us. No, I said, I'm not in the punishment business. Chloe whispered, then why? I touched the old doorframe, splintered, chipped, scarred. Because this place tells a story, I said. A story you do know, it holds the truth you've been too comfortable to ask. What truth? Caleb murmured. I looked at the peeling paint, the rusted heater vent, the dim light bulbs, the mailboxes dented with past frustrations. The truth that nothing you grew up with came easy, I said. The truth that comfort is built, not given. The truth that you inherited the ending of a story you never learned the beginning of. Chloe wiped her eyes, streaking mascara across her hand. Mom, what if we can't handle this? You will, I said, because I did and because you're mine. Silence settled over the hallway again, but not the same silence from earlier. This one buzzed with something new fear, humility, awakening. I looked at each of them. There's a bed inside, I said. 3 blankets, heat that works loud but steady, soup on the stove, a roof that will keep you dry until morning. They listened like children hearing instructions during a storm. And tomorrow, I added, we start rebuilding. But you don't get to rebuild until you step through the door. Caleb swallowed hard. You're leaving again? Yes. For the whole night? Yes. Tessa whispered, barely audible. Will you come back? I nodded slowly. Come back, I said, not rescue. Caleb reached for the key, his hand shook, but it closed around the metal. For the first time tonight, he turned the lock. The door creaked open, warm air spilling out into the cold hallway. Chloe stood, Tessa stood. Caleb held the door. They didn't look confident, they looked terrified. But they stepped inside, together, and as the door closed behind them, I felt a shift, quiet, subtle, heavy with meaning. They weren't saved, they were starting. I turned, walked back down the stairs, boots echoing like punctuation marks in the silence. Transformation had begun, not for them. For all of us. The hallway door shut behind me with a hollow thud that echoed through my ribs. I didn't look back. If I did, I might have run to them, wrapped them in my coat, dragged them home, undone every hard lesson I'd just carved into the night. Instead, I descended the stairs one slow step at a time, each creak of aging would a reminder that transformation is not gentle. It is loud. It is uncomfortable. It grinds away the old self until what's left is raw and unprotected. Outside, the cold slapped me with a force that cleared my thoughts instantly. It wasn't just winter biting my skin, it was the clarity of what I'd committed to. I drove away from Maple View with the kind of hollow ache only a parent understands, the ache that comes from forcing your child to grow when it would be so much easier to keep them small. I circled the block once, twice, 3 times, not because I doubted my decision, but because I needed to be absolutely certain that I could stand by it. On the 4th pass, I stopped myself. I went home, but not to sleep. The night stretched ahead, long and sharp, as I paced my quiet kitchen with a cup of tea I didn't drink. The Christmas tree in the corner blinked weakly, strings of lights flickering like they were grieving. Half the ornaments were handmade from their childhood, lopsided paper angels, glue-smudged stars, little globes filled with glitter. I'd kept every single one. I touched a faded ornament Chloe made when she was 6, her uneven handwriting scribbled across the back. For Mom, you make everything warm. I closed my eyes. Warmth was the one thing I couldn't give them tonight, but maybe tomorrow. Hours passed, snow thickened. The world fell silent except for the clock ticking on the mantel. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not a call, not a text. A security alert. I froze. Maple View motion detected outside Unit C. My stomach knotted. I grabbed my coat, keys, boots, and was out the door before common sense caught up. The roads were deserted, covered in a clean sheet of white. My headlights carved 2 trembling tunnels through the darkness as I tore toward the apartment building. When I arrived, the street was quiet, but too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes instinct crawl up your spine. I parked crookedly, half on the curb, I didn't care. Running up the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering in my throat, the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead painted everything in sickly yellow. I reached the 3rd floor and froze. The door to 3C was open, wide open. A faint, warm glow spilled into the hallway. Inside, the sound hit me first. Not crying, not fighting, not fear, laughter. I blinked, not relieved yet, suspicious. Slowly, I stepped into the doorway, and the sight in front of me felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with bare, cold fingers. All 3 of them were inside. Caleb was sitting cross-legged on the bare mattress, wrapped in one of the scratchy blankets, staring at a deck of cards as if it were a foreign object. Chloe sat at the tiny table with the ancient radio she'd found on the counter, twisting the dial until static became recognizable music. A tinny, warbly Christmas tune from some forgotten station. Tessa was stirring the pot of soup on the stove with a wobbly wooden spoon, her hair tied up in a messy bun, her face soft with concentration. The apartment smelled like chicken broth and cheap cinnamon candles, the kind left over from tenants past. Then Chloe noticed me. She didn't smile, she didn't cry, she didn't rush forward. She simply said quietly, "Mom, we got scared, but we figured it out." I didn't move. Caleb stood and rubbed his eyes, weary but steady. "After you left," he said, "we panicked. We sat outside for a long time. But then Tess asked what you would have done." Tessa shrugged, cheeks pink. "You wouldn't have stayed in the hallway," she said. "You would have gone inside and made it work, so we did." My knees went weak. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. Their faces were different. Not transformed, not healed, not humbled, not yet, but something had shifted. They had stepped into fear instead of away from it. That was the turning point. I forced my voice not to tremble. What did you all do?" Chloe exhaled, almost laughing at herself. "We cleaned," she said. "The place was dusty. Someone left noodles in the cabinet. Tess freaked out at a spider. Caleb killed it and then screamed louder than she did. Caleb glared. I tripped on purpose to confuse it. I almost smiled, almost." Tessa pointed at the tenuous collection of mismatched bowls on the counter. "We heated soup. I think we made too much. And we found cards, so we played. We're terrible at it." I stepped farther inside, the warmth hitting me like a gentle apology. They made the place theirs. Sloppy, imperfect, chaotic, but theirs. I took a breath. "Are you all right?" I asked. Three heads nodded. "We're cold," Chloe said, "and tired, and the walls are thin and the floor creaks and someone upstairs is yelling a lot," she exhaled. "But we're okay." Caleb sank onto the mattress again. "I didn't realize," he murmured, eyes on his hands, "how much you did for us, not until we saw how hard it is just to exist here." Tessa stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, we didn't choose this place. But now that we're in it, we can see what you survived." She hesitated. "What you protected us from." My chest tightened. A mother's greatest pain isn't distance, it's invisibility. And tonight, they finally saw me, not as a wallet, not as a fallback plan. Not as a fragile piece of family decor. As a woman, as a person, as someone who clawed her way up a wall they had never even known existed. I leaned against the counter. "Do you hate me?" I asked. Chloe shook her head immediately. "Mom, we hate what we became." Silence rippled through the room. Then Caleb added, voice breaking, "Thank you for making us see it." I looked at them, my children, grown but growing still, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt the smallest, faintest thread of relief. Not forgiveness, not resolution, not yet, but awareness, the beginning of responsibility, the first glimmer of change. I straightened, feeling strength return to my spine. "All right," I said, "you made it through the first night. Tomorrow we take the next step." They exchanged uneasy glances. "What step?" Caleb asked. I looked at him. "Work," Chloe swallowed. "What kind?" "The kind that reminds you what real people do every day." Tessa whispered, "Where?" A slow, controlled breath left my lungs. "Where I did," I said, their eyes widened. "You're coming with me tomorrow." A long silence stretched. They knew exactly what that meant, and for the first time none of them protested. Transformation had begun. The next chapter would test them, break them, rebuild them, and by the time Christmas morning arrived, they would no longer be the children who uninvited their own mother. They would be the adults who understood why I walked away and why I came back. Morning came brutally early inside Maple View. Thin sunlight seeped through the cracked blinds like a reluctant apology. The radiator clanged awake with violent rattles, coughing heat into the small apartment as if it resented the work. I didn't sleep. I waited in the truck outside, watching the building through a fogged windshield. Trucks idle with purpose, mine idled with fear. At 5:45 a.m., the building door creaked open. Chloe stepped out first. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands escaping everywhere. She wore jeans that didn't fit perfectly and a hoodie too thin for the cold. Her face held the kind of tired that sinks past skin and into bone. Caleb followed, eyes half open, shoulders slumped, a jacket zipped up to his chin as though bracing for battle. Tessa came last, moving slowly, every step a quiet complaint her mouth didn't dare voice. They looked like people walking into a test they were guaranteed to fail. Good. Growth is born in failure, not comfort. I stepped out of the truck. "Get in," I said. No greetings, no soft voices, no hot chocolate or breakfast or warm blankets, not today. They climbed in without argument, their silence an unspoken admission. They knew today wasn't about easing them in. It was about showing them, teaching them, and letting the lesson hurt. The diner wasn't glamorous even on its best days, and today wasn't one of them. The sign above the door flickered. Ruby S. Missing the left half of the R, the windows were fogged, scratched, and smudged by years of palms pressed against them in desperation or exhaustion. Inside, the place smelled like burned coffee, fried onions, and survival. Ruby herself stood behind the counter, arms crossed. A woman built of steel and scars. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun so tight it could have held the building together. "Morning," she said gruffly without even looking up. "You're late." I checked the clock. We were 5 minutes early. "Good," I murmured to my kids. "Welcome to the real world." Ruby finally eyed them, gaze sharp as a blade. "These the ones you warned me about?" I didn't flinch. "Yes," Ruby snorted. "Figures." Chloe shifted uncomfortably. What do we?" Ruby cut her off. "Rule 1, she barked. "No questions before coffee is brewed." Caleb frowned. "There's a rule for that?" Ruby stared him down. "There's a rule for everything." I stepped back, letting the battlefield open in front of them. Ruby slammed a stack of aprons on the counter. "Tie these. Not too loose or they'll trip you, not too tight or you'll pass out." Tessa hesitated. "Why would we pass?" Ruby didn't even bother responding. She simply threw a rag at her. "Table wiping starts now. Soap bucket S by the sink. Move." Tessa nearly stumbled, grabbing the bucket. Caleb received a tray. "You're on drinks, coffee, water, tea, sodas. If you mix up sweet tea and unsweetened, God help you." He gulped. Chloe was handed a condiments caddy with ketchup bottles, mustard packets, jam cups, salt shakers. "You're refilling every table until I say stop," Ruby said. "And if so much as one sugar packet is crooked, I'll know." Chloe stared at the bucket like it was a bomb. This isn't what we expected." Ruby's brows shot up. "Oh, did you expect influencers? Coffee tastings? Artisanal flat whites? Welcome to a diner, sweetheart. Now start working." She turned her gaze to me. "Watch from a distance. If they ask for help, ignore them." I nodded. I knew this rule well. Helping too early is enabling. Helping at the right time is teaching. Helping after they break is rebuilding. Today was breaking day. It took 7 minutes for Chloe to crumble. Only 7. She was trying to refill salt shakers and spilled an entire packet of pepper onto table 3. When she rushed to wipe it, her elbow knocked over the water glass Ruby had just placed. It shattered on the floor. She froze. Tears threatened. No one helped her. Ruby merely pointed to the broom. "Clean it or bleed on it," Ruby said. "Your choice." Chloe's hands shook violently as she swept. Caleb wasn't far behind. A customer snapped his fingers at him. A man in a neon jacket with a lunchbox, clearly on break from a construction site. "Hey, kid," the man barked. "Coffee, and make it strong. None of that watery nonsense." Caleb nodded and filled the cup. The man took one sip and spat it into the sink. "This is mud," he yelled. "You even know how to brew coffee?" Caleb apologized 3 times. The man didn't care. Tessa had the worst assignment, cleaning booth seats with a cracked spray bottle. She gagged every 2 minutes. Burnt grease, old food, spilled soda, the stale smell of years embedded into leather. Ruby tapped her cigarette against the counter. "Don't make faces," she said. "The booths can see you. They get offended." Tessa blinked in confusion. "The booths? Don't question her," I whispered from behind. "Just clean." Hours crawled by like wounded animals. By 10 a.m., they were exhausted, sweaty, disheveled, overwhelmed. I watched every moment, not with cruelty, with purpose. Because each struggle was a mirror reflecting who they had become, people who knew luxury but not labor. Style but not service. Comfort but not cost. Around noon, everything collapsed at once. The diner filled truckers, factory workers, elderly couples, single mothers, 2 loud teenagers ordering fries, a man arguing on his phone about overdue bills. Noise erupted. Chaos swelled. And my kids drowned in it. Chloe dropped an entire tray of condiments, bottles rolling across the floor like escaping prisoners. Caleb burned his hand on the coffee pot. Tessa sat down, overwhelmed, head between her knees. Ruby shouted orders fast enough to cut through bone. And then, the moment I knew was coming. The breaking point arrived. A customer snapped at Chloe. "Why are you so slow? God, do you even know how to work? This is basic. Even a toddler could do it." His tone was sharp, dismissive, entitled, the same tone they'd used on me. Chloe's face drained of color. Her breath caught, she stammered, voice cracking. I'm trying." "Try harder," he sneered, "or move." Caleb stepped forward, furious. "Hey, don't talk to her." Ruby caught his arm like a hawk. "No fighting customers," she hissed. "They don't pay for battles, they pay for service." Chloe stood frozen, shaking so hard her apron string came undone. I stepped closer enough for her to see me, not close enough to intervene. Mom, she whispered, voice breaking, I can't do this. I looked at her directly, firm, steady. Yes, I said quietly, you can. Her tears spilled over. It's so hard. Yes, I said, for millions of people, every day, and you never noticed. Chloe wiped her face with the back of her hand, ashamed. I didn't know it was like this. You weren't supposed to, I said. But now you do. She swallowed. Mom, I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. It wasn't the dramatic apology of someone caught, it was the whisper of someone awakening, the moment she truly broke. And breaking was the first step toward rebuilding. The diner's lunch rush didn't end so much as collapse under its own weight, leaving a battlefield of crumbs, grease stains, half-empty mugs, and exhausted bodies behind. Ruby flicked ash from her cigarette into an old coffee mug, eyeing my kids like she was inspecting three recruits who'd barely survived their first day of boot camp. Chloe leaned against the counter, breath ragged, apron soaked with spilled soda and God knows what else. Caleb rubbed his burnt hand under the cold tap, jaw clenched, but eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. Tessa sat on a stool with her head back, staring at the ceiling like she was questioning every life choice she had ever made. Don't sit long, Ruby barked, not looking up. Breaks 2 minutes. Tessa blinked. 2? Ruby glanced at her. Do you pay rent here? Tessa shook her head quickly. Then 2 minutes. Caleb muttered, this is insane. Ruby smirked. No, this is breakfast shift. I stood by the entryway far enough to stay uninvolved, close enough to watch the cracks deepen. This was the moment resentment usually crept in, when exhaustion blurs into anger, and anger looks for someone to blame. I braced myself, but something unexpected happened. Chloe stepped forward. Ruby, she said softly. Ruby raised an eyebrow. Yes, princess? Chloe didn't flinch. I'm sorry for slowing things down earlier. Ruby's expression sharpened. Oh, you apologizing to me? Yes. Why? Chloe swallowed. Because, she hesitated, then forced the truth out. Because you were right. I don't know how to do any of this, and I thought I did. Ruby studied her for a long moment, then snorted. Good, most rich kids try to argue. You're admitting it, that's new. Caleb blinked. Rich, we're not. Ruby rolled her eyes. Son, you wear shoes that cost more than my rent. Don't play humble on my floor. Caleb flushed red to the ears. Tessa quietly murmured, we didn't mean to be disrespectful. Ruby shrugged. Didn't mean it still means you did it. Their faces dropped with shame. Good. Shame is the beginning of accountability, and accountability is the beginning of change. Ruby lit another cigarette, leaning back. Let me tell you something, she said, smoke curling around her words. You three walk like people who have never had to run. Caleb frowned. We've run before. No, Ruby said. You've jogged for exercise, you've sprinted for sports, but you haven't run for survival. The room stilled. You haven't run because rent is late. You haven't run because a baby needs formula. You haven't run because if you're late one more time, you're fired. Her eyes softened barely. You're learning today, that's good. Chloe whispered, learning what? Ruby pointed her cigarette at me. What she's been screaming without saying, that the world doesn't owe you comfort. A hush fell, Tessa's voice trembled. We didn't know, Ruby shrugged. You weren't supposed to. But ignorance is only innocent until awareness hits. After that, it's a choice. I watched their faces absorb the truth like bitter medicine. They didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't excuse, they listened. And listening was the first real progress they'd made since the wreckage of last night. Ruby clapped her hands suddenly, breaking the moment. All right, break S over. Mop needs doing, booths need scrubbing, let's move. But before they could react, a familiar voice chimed from behind me. You run in a preschool now, Ruby? I turned, Mr. Dalton, gray hair, thick glasses, heavy coat dusted with snow, shuffled through the door. He'd been a regular since the year I worked here. He'd always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, no small talk. He glanced at my kids with curiosity. These yours? He asked me. I nodded. Learning, I said simply. He huffed a laugh. About time. Chloe frowned. You know us? Dalton shrugged. Not by name, but I've seen you in town. Heard enough from your mother to know she loves you more than some folks deserve. Caleb stiffened. He continued. And I know what she built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, day by day, with hands that worked twice as hard as your father ever did. The kids stared at me, stunned. Dalton lowered onto his usual stool. She never bragged, he said, never played the victim. She just worked hard, quietly, and every penny she made went into you three. He looked at them dead on. That woman kept this town fed, and she sure as hell kept you alive. Heat built behind my eyes, my throat tightened. Chloe whispered, we didn't know. Dalton shook his head. Normal, he said. Kids don't see the hands that hold the house up. He pointed at them. But now you see the cracks in your own foundation. Good, means you're ready to rebuild. His gaze softened just enough. You got a good mother. You treat her like gold, you hear? Chloe nodded quickly. Caleb looked at the floor. Tessa wiped a tear. Ruby tapped the counter. If you're done getting schooled, grab the mop. The next hours were a blur of hard labor. Caleb burned through 4 pots of coffee trying to get it right. Chloe scrubbed booths until her hands cramped. Tessa cleaned floors with sweat dripping down her neck. And I stayed in the corner, arms crossed, heart breaking and healing at once. Around 3 p.m. Ruby slammed a ledger shut. Shift S over, she announced. The kids sagged with relief. Same time tomorrow, Ruby added. Chloe blinked. Tomorrow? Ruby scoffed. What, you think one day fixes years of entitlement? Sweetheart, you're in kindergarten. Caleb looked at me. I raised an eyebrow. What? I asked softly. You thought reality was a one-day experience? He swallowed hard. No, he murmured. I get it. Tessa whispered. We come back, we will. Ruby smirked. Good, wear thicker shoes. Outside, the cold hit them differently. Harsh but honest, they looked older. Not aged, matured. The quiet between us wasn't bitter, it was reflective. Finally, Chloe spoke. Mom, thank you. Her voice shook, not from exhaustion, but from awakening. For this, she said, for today, for everything. Caleb stepped closer. I didn't know, he said quietly. How hard life is when you're not standing on a cushion. Tessa nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. We thought we were grown, we were. I inhaled deeply, letting the winter air fill my lungs. This was what I'd been waiting for, not obedience, not groveling, awareness, humility, understanding. But they weren't done, not even close. The next stage would hurt more, because now that they'd seen the truth, they'd have to confront themselves. And Christmas morning was approaching fast. The reckoning hadn't even begun. The walk back to Maple View felt heavier than the walk to Ruby's. Not physically, emotionally. Each of my children moved slowly, shoulders slumped, footsteps dragging through slush as if gravity had suddenly discovered them and refused to let go. They weren't just tired, they were unraveling. And unraveling is the necessary precursor to truth. I let them walk ahead a few steps, watching the subtle shifts in their posture. Chloe, normally upright and poised, now hunched inward, hugging her own elbows like she was trying to hold herself together. Caleb walked stiffly, jaw clenched, his burnt hand tucked in his jacket pocket, a silent reminder of how quickly confidence burns away under real heat. Tessa moved the slowest, each step tentative, like the world had become unfamiliar terrain that might collapse beneath her feet. When they reached the entrance to the building, none of them touched the door. They stood there staring at it, as if the truth behind it weighed more than the truth inside. I stepped beside them. No words, just presence. Eventually, Chloe whispered, Mom, can we not go inside yet? Her voice trembled around the edges. Where do you want to go? I asked. She looked at the cracked sidewalk, the rusting handrail, the snow piling along the curb. Anywhere else, she murmured. Caleb cleared his throat. There's something we need to say. Tessa wrapped her arms around herself. Everything, she added softly. We need to say everything. I nodded once, then turned and walked toward the small park across the street, the same park where I used to push them on the swings when we couldn't afford a backyard. It was nearly empty, just an old bench dusted with snow. I brushed off a patch and sat. They hesitated only a moment before joining me, 2 on the bench, one standing in front of us like she couldn't sit until she confessed. Chloe was that one. Her fingers shook. Her breath fogged, and then she broke. The collapse wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was a quiet surrender. Mama, she whispered, and my chest tightened painfully. She hadn't called me that since she was 7. I messed everything up, she said, her voice cracked. I don't know how I became this version of myself. I kept my tone steady. Tell me. Chloe bit her lip so hard it turned white. When we got older, she began, and things got nicer, bigger house, new cars, private school. I thought that meant we were supposed to be nicer too, more polished, more impressive. She wiped her eyes. I thought that's what success was. Her shoulders shook. So when you didn't look like the other moms, when you wore clothes until they faded and drove the same truck. I didn't understand. I thought you were embarrassing yourself, embarrassing us. Caleb muttered, Chloe, but she shook her head. No, I need to say it. She turned to me. Her next words were barely audible. I thought you were beneath us. A knife twisted inside me. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I asked, and now? Chloe's breath hitched. Now I know the truth. She looked at her hands, small, manicured, trembling. Everything we had, you built. Everything I boasted about, you paid for. and everything I took for granted you sacrificed for. Her voice broke completely, and I threw it back in your face. Caleb spoke next, voice rough. I didn't think I needed to respect you, he admitted. You always fixed everything, paid everything, saved everything. He swallowed hard. I treated you like a backup plan, not a parent. Tessa finally slid onto the bench beside me, leaning her head against my shoulder like she used to when she was small. I never meant to be cruel, she whispered. I just didn't know how to see you. She took a shaky breath. I saw the comfort you gave us, but not the cost. The three of them sat there, broken, raw, human, but I couldn't comfort them. Not yet. They needed the truth more than they needed warmth. You all think, I said carefully, that your choices just hurt my feelings. Chloe winced, Caleb lowered his head. Tessa squeezed my hand. I continued, but this wasn't about feelings, this was about identity. Their eyes lifted toward me. You treated me like an inconvenience, I said, like a flaw in the image you were trying so hard to maintain. You erased me for aesthetics. Tessa covered her mouth, eyes filling. I didn't teach you that, I said, and somewhere along the way I let the world do the teaching instead. Silence stretched, not empty but charged. Caleb broke it first. What happens now? He asked quietly. I inhaled deeply. Now we rebuild, I said, but not the way you think. Chloe straightened. What do you mean? I looked at the apartment building. At Maple View, I said, you will stay until you earn your way out. Tessa blinked at me. Earn. Yes, I said, earn. Caleb's brows knitted. How long? As long as it takes. They fell silent again, but this time the silence wasn't resistance, it was acceptance. And then I said the part that wounded me the most, and you won't come back home. Not until you can stand without leaning on me. Chloe's breath caught painfully. Mom, no, I said gently but firmly. This is not punishment. It's restoration. They looked at me like people realizing the ocean they feared was the same one that would teach them to swim. This is your second beginning, I said softly, and beginnings hurt. Snow drifted around us, settling in our hair, on our coats, on the frozen ground beneath our feet. Caleb finally exhaled, long and shaky. We won't quit. Tessa whispered, we'll try. And Chloe said the words I'd waited years to hear. Mom, teach us, please. My throat tightened so hard it ached, but my voice stayed controlled. I will, I said, but only if you do the work. They nodded, all three, resolute, humbled, ready. For the first time, they weren't asking for rescue. They were asking for guidance. And guidance is something I could give without losing myself again. I looked toward Maple View, its old bricks glowing in the weak light. Come on, I said. Let's go back inside. The four of us walked together, not as a broken family, not as a distant one, but as something in between. Something becoming, something rebuilding, something brave. The apartment felt different when we returned. Not warmer, not cleaner, not safer, just different. As if the air had shifted to make space for the truth we'd ripped open outside in the snow. The door shut behind us with a soft click, the kind that doesn't announce a new chapter, but acknowledges one silently. Inside, the radiator hissed, the freezer hummed. The thin walls trembled with distant arguments and loud footsteps. Same place, new reality. Chloe sank onto the mattress, legs trembling too much to hold her upright. Caleb lowered himself onto the floor, back against the wall, exhaustion written into every angle of his body. Tessa curled her knees to her chest on the one decent chair, head resting on her arms. No phones, no screens, no distractions, just themselves, exposed in the harsh honesty of cramped square footage. I stood for a while without speaking. Sometimes silence is a sharper teacher than any lecture. When I finally sat on the windowsill, all three of them lifted their heads as if waiting for the verdict. But I wasn't here to punish. Not anymore. I was here to reveal. Do you know, I began slowly, why I let you believe I struggled financially all these years? Chloe blinked. You didn't want us to feel guilty. Caleb guessed, because you're humble? Tessa whispered, because money isn't who you are? I shook my head. No, the word settled like a stone. I hid it, I continued softly, because wealth without wisdom destroys people. Their faces changed all at once, shock, confusion, a dawning fear. Caleb sat forward. Wait, wealth, how much wealth are we talking about? My voice stayed calm. Enough that none of you ever had to worry a day in your life. Enough that I could have given you whatever you wanted. Chloe's eyes widened. Mom, what are you saying? I met her gaze squarely. That I'm a very wealthy woman, and I always have been. The silence that followed felt like the building itself had inhaled sharply. Caleb paled, but we grew up in a modest home. Yes, I said, Because I built that home with my hands, and I refused to let you grow up thinking comfort was normal. Tessa frowned, breath catching. So the old truck, the coupons, all of that was intentional, I finished. They stared at me as if the floor had shifted beneath them. Your father and I worked hard, I continued. And after he passed, I worked harder. I invested early, bought property when no one else wanted it, ran rentals, built homes, sold at the right time, bought again. Built again, I leaned forward. But I never upgraded your lives with that money because I knew what comfort does to untested children. Chloe's voice cracked. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Because knowing would have poisoned you, I said. And it did, even without knowing. Caleb whispered, we acted like spoiled brats. You acted, I said gently, exactly like children who never had to face consequences. A long, raw pause, Tessa wiped her face. So all this time you could have paid off our debts, covered our rent, fixed everything. Yes, I said plainly, and I did, quietly, until it began to damage you. Chloe closed her eyes tight. Mom, we treated you like a burden. We thought you didn't fit our lifestyle. I nodded. I know, and it hurt. But I also knew you couldn't see me clearly until the world stripped away the illusions you loved so much. Caleb's voice was strangled. We thought we were above you. And now? I asked. Caleb swallowed hard. Now I see we were standing on your back. The truth punctured the room like a needle. Painful, precise, necessary. I stood and walked toward the tiny kitchen counter where a stack of papers sat neatly arranged. I had placed them there earlier, waiting for this moment. I slid the stack across the counter. What's that? Chloe asked. My will, I said, their breath caught collectively. I continued. I wrote a new one 2 days ago, before I took you to Maple View, before any of this. Caleb stiffened. Mom, no interruptions, I said firmly. They fell silent instantly. I divided everything evenly, 3 equal shares. But I signed a clause. Tessa whispered, What clause? That none of you receives a cent, I said, unless you prove you can survive without it for 1 full year. The shock on their faces was almost painful to witness. Mom, Chloe whispered. Her voice trembled uncontrollably. Why would you do that? Because inheritance should be earned, I said. Not expected, not demanded, not used as a weapon for entitlement. Caleb's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So this apartment, the diner, the struggle, it's all part of the test? No, I said gently. It's part of your education. They stared at me in stunned silence. Then something unexpected happened. Tessa stood slowly, walked toward me, and wrapped her arms around my waist. She held on, not for support, not out of fear, but with genuine gratitude. I understand, she whispered. And I'm not angry, I'm relieved, because now I know exactly why we fell so far. Chloe joined her, pressing her face into my shoulder, tears wetting my sweater. We needed this, she whispered. I didn't know it until now, but we did. Caleb didn't move at first. He stood by the wall, gripping his burnt hand protectively, eyes wet but stubborn. Then he exhaled, voice breaking. Mom, he said quietly, you raised us twice, once with love and now with truth. He stepped forward and put his hand on my back. The 3 of them held onto me like children again, and for the first time since this began, I let myself close my eyes, just for a second, just long enough to feel the shift inside them. The beginning of becoming, the beginning of responsibility, the beginning of respect. But the lesson wasn't done, because love has 2 sides, warmth and fire, and before the Christmas dawn came, they would feel both. Morning came like a fist. There was no gentle sunrise, no warm glow creeping across the sky. Just a hard gray light that pushed its way through the blinds, exposing every flaw, every bruise, every ounce of exhaustion clinging to the room. The kids were already awake when I knocked on their door, not dressed, not ready, just awake, wide-eyed, silent, changed. Chloe sat at the edge of the mattress, hair tangled, face pale. Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight across his chest as though bracing for a storm. Tessa sat hunched over the tiny table, staring at a chipped mug like she was reading her future in its cracks. They looked like people who had seen the truth and were still trying to make sense of how it felt. Get dressed, I said simply. We're leaving in 15 minutes. They didn't ask where, not today. Something in them had broken open, a quiet obedience that wasn't submission, but awareness. When they returned, bundled in mismatched thrift store jackets from the closet and worn shoes I'd bought for them, I led them downstairs and out into the freezing morning. Where are we going? Caleb finally asked. I didn't answer, not yet. Not until they could see it with their own eyes. We walked 2 blocks through frostbitten air, the city still half asleep. Trash trucks rumbled in the distance. A stray dog trotted across the street. A man slept wrapped in a blanket by the bus stop, steam rising from his breath like a fading ghost. Chloe paused, swallowing hard. She wasn't used to seeing hardship without a filter, without distance, without the ability to look away. Good. I stopped in front of an old brick building wedged between a boarded up storefront and a payday loan office. The sign above the door was faded but readable: Community Support Center. Chloe whispered, "Why here?" I answered calmly, "Because before I had money, I had nothing. And this is where I survived." Their eyes widened. Tessa touched the cold brick as if trying to imagine a younger version of me among these walls. Caleb looked at me carefully. "You're telling us you needed help before?" I met his eyes. "I didn't need help," I corrected softly. "I needed work, work no one else wanted to do, work that paid in scraps, work that saved my life." I opened the door. The smell of old paint and coffee hit us immediately. Inside, volunteers bustled around sorting food donations, organizing clothes, washing trays, stacking boxes. No luxury, no recognition, just work. The hardest kind, work without applause. Today, this was their training ground. A volunteer approached Janice, a woman with a kind smile and sleeves rolled up to her elbows. "This them?" She asked me. I nodded. She inspected my kids like she was assessing livestock. "Soft hands," she said, grabbing Caleb's palm. "Soft hearts too, probably. We'll fix that." Tessa stiffened. Chloe flushed with embarrassment. Good. Embarrassment can cleanse entitlement faster than any lecture. Janice handed them each a neon vest. "Name tags inside," she said. "Grab gloves, follow me." Caleb frowned. "What are we doing exactly?" Janice didn't miss a beat. "Whatever needs doing." The first hour broke them. Chloe was tasked with organizing food bank shelves, heavy boxes, cold storage, rotating cans by expiration date while her fingers stiffened in the chill. Her movements were clumsy, her posture bent. Every few minutes she shifted her weight like her back was screaming. But she didn't quit, not once. Caleb was assigned dish duty. A small industrial sink meant for workers with experience and muscle memory. He had neither. By the 15th tray, he was sweating. By the 30th, his arms shook uncontrollably. By the 60th, he looked ready to pass out. Yet he said nothing, not a complaint, not an excuse. Just silent labor. Tessa was in the clothing room sorting piles donated by strangers with lives more chaotic than hers. Shirts stained with oil, jeans with worn knees, coats missing buttons. She folded neatly, sorted carefully, stacked gently. And halfway through, she broke, not loudly, not dramatically. Just one tear sliding down her cheek and dripping onto a sweater she held. She wiped it quickly, but I saw. Loss of illusion is always quiet. By noon, they were wrecked, sweaty, filthy, shivering from the cold each time the door opened. Janice clapped once, calling for a break. "Good work," she told them. "You're slow, but you're trying. Trying counts." Chloe nearly collapsed onto a bench. Tessa leaned her head against my shoulder without hesitation. Caleb sank to the floor, breathing hard. "Mom," he whispered, "I never knew people worked this hard for so little." "No," I said, "you never cared to look." His lips trembled. "You're right." There was no fight left in him, only honesty. After break, Janice approached me quietly. "You've got good kids," she said. I scoffed gently. "They weren't always." "No one is," she replied. "But they're learning, fast." I looked toward them, Chloe tightening her ponytail with shaking hands, Caleb rolling up his sleeves despite his arms trembling, Tessa wiping her face and forcing herself back into work mode. "They're trying," I said softly. Janice smiled, warm, knowing. "They're becoming," she corrected. The HARDESD part came last. Late afternoon, Janice gathered them in the main hall. "We have a rule here," she said. "No one leaves without understanding why they came." Chloe swallowed. Caleb's brows furrowed. Tessa clutched her vest like a lifeline. Janice looked at each of them. "Why are you here?" she asked. Silence. My children weren't used to voicing their failures, so I spoke first. "They're here because they forgot where they came from." Janice nodded, then she turned to Chloe. "You." Chloe's voice cracked immediately. "I'm here because I thought money made me better, and I treated my mother like she was small." She cried, not out of shame, but realization. Caleb next. "I'm here because I didn't respect the work behind the life I had." His words were raw, painfully raw. Tessa finally whispered through tears, "I'm here because I took comfort for granted." Janice placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "And now," she said, "you earn your redemption." Then she stepped back. "All three of you serve dinner." Their eyes widened, serving food to strangers. Women escaping violence, men living in shelters, parents who couldn't afford groceries wasn't labor, it was humility. and humility is the final threshold before change. The dinner shift transformed them. Chloe offered plates with trembling hands, including seconds with kindness, not obligation. Caleb poured water, refilled cups, listened to stories he once would have rolled his eyes at. Tessa guided a young boy to a table, tying his shoelace when it came undone. They didn't work like privileged kids anymore. They worked like people who understood loss, who understood humanity, who understood me. When the shift ended, the three of them walked toward me slow, worn, and something else, awakened. Caleb spoke first, voice cracking. Mom, we don't deserve you. Tessa whispered, but we're going to earn you. Chloe wiped her face with the back of her hand. We're not asking for forgiveness, she said. We're asking for another chance, and we're willing to work for it. I looked at them, the children I'd raised, the adults they were becoming, the humans they were reclaiming. You'll have it, I said, but this isn't the end. Chloe nodded firmly. We know, Caleb exhaled. We're not running. Tessa reached for my hand. We're not quitting. I squeezed their fingers lightly. Good, I said, because tomorrow gets harder. They didn't flinch, didn't protest, didn't panic. For the first time, they simply said, okay. I didn't sleep the night before. Not because of worry, not because of fear, but because for the first time in years, I felt my children moving toward me instead of away from me, like the slow thaw after a brutal winter. And still, I knew we weren't finished. Growth doesn't happen in a straight line. It comes in waves, it surges, recedes, slams back harder. Part 12 had been their breaking. Part 13 would be their reckoning. And the moment I opened my eyes that morning, I knew Christmas was coming, so was the truth, all of it. They were up before me. I heard the soft clatter of dishes in the small apartment kitchen. Not porcelain, cheap thrift store plates, but handled with care as though they were crystal. I stepped into the doorway quietly. Tessa was scrambling eggs in a dented pan. Chloe was folding old napkins and setting them on the table. Caleb was rinsing mugs, steam rising from the hot water. They were talking in low voices, working together in a way I hadn't seen since they were children building Lego castles in the living room. Caleb noticed me first. He froze. Mom, we made breakfast, he said, voice rough with sleep. A simple gesture, small, humble, but it was the first voluntary act of service they'd offered me in years. I sat down carefully. Chloe placed the mismatched plate in front of me like she was presenting a feast to a queen. I know it's not special, she murmured. It's honest, I replied. Tessa's eyes softened. I ate slowly, letting the moment settle into them like roots. Halfway through, Caleb cleared his throat. Mom, he said, we've been talking, and I think we owe you something. He reached under the table, pulled out a small notebook. He slid it toward me. What's this? It's all the things you paid for, Tessa said quietly, that we pretended you didn't. Chloe added, we listed every expense we remembered. Rent, car, tuition, trips, clothes, everything. And multiplied it by interest, Caleb said with a grim smile. High interest. I opened the notebook. The handwriting inside was shaky, uneven. Pages filled with lists, numbers, dates. Some wrong, some exaggerated, some guessed, but all effort. Caleb took a breath. We want to pay you back. I closed the book gently. Children don't pay back parents, I said. Chloe shook her head. No, but adults can. Her voice didn't waver, that was new. We walked out of the building an hour later. The sky was pale and wintry, the kind of cold that pinched the lungs. Holiday decorations flickered across the street, strings of lights, wreaths in windows, a Santa statue missing its hat. Tessa tucked her gloved hands into her coat pockets. Mom, she said softly, where are we going today? I exhaled. The place you abandoned first. All three of them stiffened. Home, Chloe whispered. No, I said, before home. Their brows furrowed. I walked ahead, forcing them to keep pace. We took a bus. They didn't complain. We walked 2 blocks. They didn't question. Then we turned the final corner. There it was, my mother's house, their grandmother's house, a place they hadn't set foot in since the funeral. The wind shifted, rattling the loose gutter. Paint peeled from the window frames. The porch sagged slightly under memories. Caleb swallowed hard. Why here? Because this is where I learned what Christmas meant, I said, and it's the first place you chose to forget. Chloe's breath hitched. Mom, we didn't forget. We got busy. Life? No, I cut in. You got comfortable. Their eyes dropped. I stepped up onto the porch and placed my hand on the old doorknob. This is where I grew up, I whispered. Where I learned to walk, to work, to love. Where I learned to survive. Where I learned family is earned, not assumed. Caleb's voice cracked. Why did we stop coming here? I turned to him fully. Because I let you? That broke them more than any punishment ever had. I unlocked the door. They followed silently. Inside, dust blanketed the furniture like snowfall. The air smelled of old books and forgotten summers. Chloe touched the edge of the sewing machine table. She made my first costume here, she murmured. And your first scarf, I reminded her. Tessa traced her finger across the family photos still lining the shelves. Did you really live here a long time? Until I was 27, I said, and I still come back every Christmas, alone. Their eyes widened in unison. Caleb whispered, even when we uninvited you. Especially then, the room fell into a thick, heavy silence. Sit, I instructed. They obeyed. I stood before them like a teacher before a class. Today, I said, you learn what you stole from yourselves. Caleb frowned. Mom, we didn't mean? You meant every word, I interrupted. When you said I didn't fit your new holiday traditions. And you meant it because you forgot that this, I gestured to the home, the photos, the threadbare carpet, is where your traditions came from. Chloe blinked back tears. Mom, we didn't know it mattered this much. I nodded once because you never asked. Their shame hung in the air, thick enough to touch. Then I walked to the old wooden chest in the corner, my mother's chest. I opened it, lifting a stack of hand-stitched Christmas stockings, one for each of them. The ones they used to hang proudly, the ones they stopped using when glittered store-bought ones felt more aesthetic. I handed each their own. They looked down at the stockings like sacred relics. Tessa clutched hers to her chest. I don't deserve this, she whispered. No, I said. But you can earn it back. Caleb raised his head slowly. How? I pointed to the window. Snow had started falling, the first flurries of the season, soft, fragile, quiet. And in that quiet, I gave them their final test. On Christmas Eve, you will host the meal. You will cook, you will prepare. You will invite those who have no one else. You will serve not me, but others. Their mouths parted. This was no small challenge. This was transformation. Chloe inhaled sharply. You're asking us to give Christmas? No, I said, voice steady. I'm asking you to restore it. The wind outside howled through the old siding. Caleb nodded first. Okay. Tessa followed. We'll do it. Chloe last. We'll make it right. I watched them, three once lost children now standing at the lip of redemption, and felt a strange ache in my chest. Pride and sorrow mixed into something new, something healing. We have 3 days, I said, and one chance. It snowed all night. Heavy, slow flakes, the kind that erase footprints and forgive mistakes. By Christmas Eve morning, the world outside my mother's old house looked like a clean slate. White, soft, silent. Inside, however, was chaos. Good chaos. Tessa ran between the kitchen and the dining room carrying mismatched plates stacked to her chin. Chloe kneaded dough with flour streaked across her cheeks like war paint. Caleb chopped vegetables with the clumsy focus of someone trying not to cut off a finger. They moved with urgency, with purpose, with something I hadn't seen in years: investment. Not in themselves, in others. 3 days ago, they would have ordered catering. 3 months ago, they would have asked me to do everything. 3 years ago, they wouldn't have shown up. Now they were sweating over gravy. Tessa wiped her brow with her sleeve. This is a lot of work. It's supposed to be, I said. Chloe grinned despite her exhaustion. Feels like punishment. It's preparation. Caleb paused mid-chop. For what? I met his eyes. For the rest of your lives. That shut him up. By noon, invitations had gone out, not to influencers. Not to wealthy friends. Not to the people who once uninvited me. This time, their guest list looked different. A single mother and her son from the shelter, an elderly neighbor who'd lost her husband, a cashier from the grocery store who worked double shifts. 3 volunteers from the support center, a homeless veteran who collected cans behind the building, and a teenage girl who'd been kicked out by her father people they once walked past without noticing. People they once believed were beneath their world. Now they were the world. We cooked until the windows fogged from the heat and our clothes smelled like herbs and butter. A cramped house overflowing with life again. Chloe's voice cracked as she whispered, Mom, it hasn't felt like Christmas in years. I touched her cheek lightly. Because Christmas isn't something you buy. It's something you give. She nodded, tears forming. The first knock came at 4 p.m. Tessa froze. Chloe gasped. Caleb whispered, Oh God. Open it, I said. Tessa hesitated, then turned the knob. A woman stood on the porch holding a toddler in oversized mittens. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from too many battles fought alone. Is this the Christmas meal? She asked softly. Tessa swallowed hard. Yes, come in, please come in. Her voice broke on the please. One by one they came. A line of souls carrying the weight of their own broken Decembers. The veteran with trembling hands. The elderly widow bundled in layers. the grocery store cashier holding a small wrapped cookie tin, the teenage girl with swollen eyes and no coat. Each arrival cracked another piece off my children's old armor. Chloe offered seats. Tessa brought blankets. Caleb carried trays with careful hands. There was no superiority, no distance, no shame, just generosity. The house filled quickly, voices overlapping, laughter rising, plates clinking. People shared stories, passed dishes, wiped tears, exchanged smiles that carried the warmth of survival. The cluttered old dining room, once abandoned, was alive again. My mother would have loved it. I watched my children as they moved through the room, not with arrogance, not with entitlement, but with ownership of something far deeper, humanity. Tessa knelt to help the toddler with her boots. Chloe served seconds and thirds. Caleb refilled cups, remembering names, details, listening with genuine interest. They didn't act like hosts, they acted like family. And then the teenage girl spoke up. Soft, shaky, but brave. "Why did you do this?" she asked. Chloe looked at her, eyes shining. "Because someone taught us what real Christmas is supposed to be." The girl tilted her head. "And what's that?" Caleb answered quietly, not leaving people in the cold. A silence fell around the table. Slow, 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 until the veteran murmured, "Wish more people understood that." Chloe squeezed his shoulder. "We're learning." After dinner, after dessert, after the final dishes were scrubbed by Caleb's raw red hands, the guests slowly bundled up to leave. Each one hugged my children. Each one whispered, "Thank you." Each one walked out lighter than they arrived. And when the door finally closed and we were alone, the house felt full despite the emptiness. Tessa sagged against the wall. I didn't know giving felt like this." Chloe wiped under her eyes. "I didn't know people hurt this deeply." Caleb exhaled shakily. "I didn't know we were part of the problem." I stepped toward them, the floorboards creaking under my weight. "You didn't know," I said, voice steady, "because you didn't look, now you've seen. Now you understand, and understanding is the first step toward change." They were crying again, not from pain, not from humiliation, but from awakening. Tessa took my hand. "Mom, can we talk now?" "Talk about what?" She swallowed. "About coming home." Chloe nodded fiercely. "We're ready." Caleb added softly, "We're not asking for our old life. We know we lost that. We're asking for you." My throat tightened. Years of swallowed hurt rose up like bitter smoke. "I love you," I said quietly. "But love isn't the same as trust. Trust must be rebuilt." Chloe stepped forward. "Then let us rebuild it, brick by brick." Caleb's voice cracked, "Like you did." Tessa whispered, "Let us earn our place back." I stared at them, three children who once banned me from Christmas, who mocked my simplicity, who worshipped appearances instead of truth. Now standing in the wreckage of their old selves asking for another chance. Not as entitled heirs, as humbled children, as humans, as mine, and I felt something loosen in my chest, something I'd held tight for too long. I opened my arms. They came to me at once. A tangle of limbs, tears, apologies pressed into my sweater. Their bodies shaking with grief and gratitude and something rarely felt among us, redemption. I held them close, my chin resting atop their heads, their warmth melting the last remnants of winter inside me. "You found your way back," I whispered. Chloe sobbed harder. "We won't lose it again." Caleb choked out, "Thank you for not giving up on us." I kissed the crown of Tessa's head. "I wasn't teaching you punishment," I said softly. "I was teaching you responsibility, and now—" "You're ready?" They pulled back, wiping their faces, smiling through tears. "So, what now?" Caleb asked. I smiled, small, steady, proud. "Now you come home." We left the old house together. Snow fell around us, soft as forgiveness. Three grown children walked beside me. Not ahead, not behind, but with me. Their arms linked with mine. No cameras, no glitter, no curated moments, just family, just honesty, just us. And as we stepped into the night, leaving footprints in untouched snow, I realized something. This Christmas wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. And they earned every inch of their way back. If you believe family is earned through actions, not entitlement, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here, we don't sugarcoat life, we tell the stories that break you, rebuild you, and remind you what really matters.